By the late 3rd century before the Common Era, the Western Mediterranean had already witnessed one major conflict between these two powers. Rome, expanding steadily across the Italian peninsula, had emerged victorious from the earlier war, while Carthage, a wealthy maritime empire centered in North Africa, retained its strength through trade, naval influence, and territories in Iberia. The Second Punic War began in 218 BCE, not with a grand declaration, but with a siege. In the Iberian city of Saguntum, allied to Rome, Hannibal initiated an attack that would trigger a response from across the Mediterranean. Rome demanded accountability. Carthage refused to restrain its general. What followed was not a localized conflict, but a war that would span continents. What makes this war so extraordinary is not only its scale, but its audacity. Instead of confronting Rome through predictable routes, Hannibal chose a path that seemed almost unthinkable. He marched his army north from Iberia, crossed the Pyrenees, and then faced an obstacle that few armies had ever dared to challenge: the Alps. With the support of his Gallic allies, he achieved decisive victories over the Romans at the Battle of the Trebia, 218 BC, and Battle of Lake Trasimene, 217 BC. In 216 BCE, near the village of Cannae in southern Italy, one of the most studied battles in military history took place. The Roman army, significantly larger than Hannibal's, sought a decisive confrontation. Their plan relied on overwhelming force, using massed infantry to break through the Carthaginian center. Hannibal, aware of this approach, designed his formation accordingly. As the battle unfolded, the Carthaginian center deliberately gave ground, drawing the Roman forces inward. Meanwhile, Hannibal's cavalry secured dominance on the flanks. Once the Roman army was sufficiently compressed, Carthaginian forces closed in from multiple directions, encircling their enemy. What followed was not a retreat, but a collapse. Ancient accounts suggest that tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed in a single day. The exact numbers remain debated among historians, but there is little doubt about the scale of the loss. It was one of the most devastating defeats Rome had ever suffered. Entire legions were effectively destroyed. And yet, the war did not end. This is where the nature of the conflict reveals itself. For many states, such a defeat would have marked the beginning of collapse. But Rome's strength lay not only in its armies, but in its institutions. It absorbed the loss, raised new forces, and continued the fight. Hannibal, despite his victories, faced his own limitations. Operating deep within enemy territory, he relied on support from local allies and reinforcements from Carthage. While some Italian states defected to his side, the core of Rome's alliance network held. Supply lines remained a constant challenge. The Roman response evolved over time. Rather than seeking immediate decisive battles, commanders began to adopt a strategy of attrition. This approach, often associated with Fabius Maximus, involved avoiding large-scale engagements and instead focusing on limiting Hannibal's movements, cutting off resources, and gradually weakening his position. It was a strategy that demanded patience, and at times it was criticized as overly cautious. But it reflected an understanding of the stakes involved. Meanwhile, the war expanded beyond Italy. In Iberia, Roman forces launched campaigns to undermine Carthaginian control, targeting key territories and disrupting the resources that supported Hannibal's efforts. These operations were complex, involving multiple commanders and shifting fronts. Success was not immediate, but over time, Rome gained ground. As the years passed, the war took on a grinding character. Victories and defeats occurred on both sides, but none were decisive enough to bring a clear end. The human cost continued to rise. Soldiers faced repeated campaigns, harsh conditions, and the constant uncertainty of survival. Civilians, too, bore the consequences as territories became battlegrounds and resources were consumed by the demands of war. Eventually, the balance began to shift. Roman successes in Iberia weakened Carthage's position, cutting off key sources of manpower and wealth. A new generation of Roman leadership emerged, among them Scipio, later known as Africanus. His approach combined elements of boldness and strategic insight, recognizing that the war could not be won solely by defending Italy. In a move that mirrored Hannibal's earlier audacity, Scipio carried the war to North Africa. This decision forced Carthage into a difficult position. To defend its homeland, it recalled Hannibal from Italy, ending his long campaign there. The stage was set for a final confrontation. In 202 BCE near Zama, the two commanders met. The battle differed from earlier engagements. Both sides had learned from years of conflict. Formations were adapted, strategies adjusted. The outcome was not predetermined, but shaped by the accumulation of experience and the realities of the moment. Scipio's forces ultimately prevailed. The reasons are complex, involving coordination, the handling of cavalry, and the ability to adapt during the battle. Hannibal, despite his skill, could not replicate the conditions that had led to his earlier victories. The defeat marked the end of the war. The consequences were profound. Carthage was significantly weakened, losing territory and influence. Rome emerged as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, setting the stage for further expansion. But the victory came at a cost that is difficult to quantify. The war had lasted for more than a decade and a half. It had spanned multiple regions, involved numerous campaigns, and resulted in immense loss of life. Agricultural systems were disrupted, cities were damaged or abandoned. Generations experienced conflict as a constant presence rather than an exception.